Let's start from the very beginning. Why dependency theory emerged. After World War II, modernization theory dominated the field of international development. It argued that every country could follow the same path as the Western world, industrialize, open its economy, and gradually become rich. But by the 1960s, this model was clearly failing. Countries in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, despite following Western advice, were not developing. Poverty and inequality persisted, and wealth continued to flow toward the industrialized West. This failure made scholars and policymakers rethink everything. Out of this frustration came dependency theory, a perspective that challenged the optimism of modernization theory. It said the problem isn't inside developing countries, it's in how the global system itself is structured. Definition: what is dependency theory? At its core, dependency theory is the idea that underdevelopment in some countries is not a stage before development. It is the result of their integration into the global capitalist system. In other words, developing nations are not lagging behind. They are kept behind by a global system that benefits the rich, industrialized countries. To put it simply, some countries are poor because others are rich, and the two conditions are connected. The core structure of dependency. Dependency theory divides the world into two main parts: the core, or metropole. The advanced industrialized countries, like the United States, United Kingdom, or Western Europe. The periphery, or satellite. The developing resource-exporting countries, such as those in Latin America, Africa, and South Asia. The relationship between them is unequal and exploitative. The core extracts raw materials, cheap labor, and resources from the periphery, processes them into high-value goods, and then sells them back at higher prices. This creates a one-way flow of wealth from poor to rich nations. The main ideas of dependency theory. Structural dependence. You see, developing countries often depend heavily on developed ones, and this dependence takes several forms. They rely on them for capital and investment, for technology and machinery, and even for markets to sell their exports. Now, what does that mean in practice? It means that their economies are not really built around the needs of their own people, but around what the developed world demands. For example, a country like Ghana exports cocoa beans but imports expensive chocolate. It stays trapped in producing low-value goods while wealth is captured abroad. Unequal exchange economist Raúl Prebisch first pointed out that the terms of trade between industrial and agricultural goods are unequal. Over time, prices of manufactured goods rise, while prices of raw materials fall. So, a developing country must sell more and more raw goods to buy the same amount of industrial goods. This is what keeps the periphery perpetually poor. Surplus extraction dependency. Theorists say that the periphery doesn't retain the value it creates. Through trade, debt, and profit repatriation, surplus value, or profit, is constantly drained to the core countries. For instance, when multinational corporations operate in developing countries, they often send most of their profits back home instead of reinvesting locally. 5. Theoretical foundations. Several scholars shaped dependency theory, each adding their unique insights. Raúl Prebisch, Argentina, argued that free trade benefits the industrialized North and harms the developing South. Gunder Frank claimed that underdevelopment is not natural. It is actively produced by global capitalism. His famous phrase, the development of underdevelopment. Immanuel Wallerstein expanded this into the world systems theory, describing a three-part division: core, semi-periphery, and periphery, all linked through a global capitalist system. Fernando Henrique Cardoso, Brazil, introduced the idea of dependent development, showing that some economic growth is possible in the periphery, but it remains dependent on external forces. Practical examples. Let's take a few real-world examples to visualize dependency. Latin America. For decades, countries like Chile and Argentina exported copper, coffee, and beef to Europe and the US while importing expensive manufactured goods. Their economies became tied to the demand of the North. Africa. Nations rich in minerals, like Congo with cobalt, export raw materials used in smartphones. Yet they remain some of the poorest countries globally. South Asia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh rely heavily on textile exports to Western markets. Their economies depend on cheap labor to remain competitive, not on local innovation or industrial diversification. Each example shows the same pattern. The global economy is structured in a way that keeps the periphery producing low-value goods and the core enjoying high-value profits. Criticism of dependency theory. While the theory powerfully explained inequality, it has also faced criticism. It is often too deterministic, assuming all poor countries are doomed to stay poor. It underestimates the role of domestic policies and governance. Examples like South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore show that some nations developed successfully within the capitalist system, not outside it. And globalization has blurred the simple core periphery line. Now countries like China or India play hybrid roles. Yet, the theory's moral and analytical strength remains. It reminds us that development cannot be understood without looking at global power relations. 9. The modern relevance. Even today, dependency theory feels alive, just in new forms. Debt dependency. Many developing nations spend more on repaying loans than on healthcare or education. Technology dependency. Global South still depends on Western or Chinese technology. Data dependency. In the digital age, data and AI are controlled by a few corporations in the North, creating a new kind of economic imbalance. So, the pattern continues. The actors have changed, but the structure remains.